The Philadelphia 76ers saw their four-game winning streak snapped in one of the most frustrating losses of the season. And one clear issue is becoming evident with this Sixers team is that there is far too much of a need for Kyle Lowry based on what this team needs him to do. I want to break down why this is becoming such a significant problem, why Nick Nurse needs to act on it right now, and what the direction the Sixers team needs to take from here. And before I get any further, I want to start with I have the utmost respect for Kyle Lowry, a local Philly kid, went to Villanova, a dude who has had an incredibly accomplished NBA career, a multi-time All-Star, an NBA champion. There is no doubt about this, the things that this man has done on a basketball floor. But Father Time waits for no man except seemingly LeBron James, and Kyle Lowry has clearly been caught by this chase. So let's dive in, and I want to start right off with his stats on the season here. So what we have so far from Lowry, 4.2 points per game, 2.8 assists, 1.8 rebounds, shooting 34.9% from the field, 33.3% from three. The 38-year-old, soon-to-be 39-year-old, has been even worse than these numbers indicate in real time. Now, he's never been a box score guy. That has never been the story of Kyle Lowry, and for what it's worth, I still do see the annoying, pesky things that has really made him a career, taking charges, being a guy capable of running the offense, and that is really where the problem comes into, is there's such a clear need for the Sixers team to have another guy capable of running the offense. I think more so than I ever expected could be the case, we are feeling the absence of Jared McCain. Now, to touch on the box score of last night's game, doing a start with this here, there was a 113-107 loss and an absolutely disastrous loss by the Sixers team. Outscored, the game ended on a 15-0 run for this Kings team. The Philadelphia 76ers were held scoreless for over the final 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And to give my full takeaways on this game, for full transparency, fell asleep at halftime, so I had to catch up on it this morning. Did watch the whole rest of the game from start to finish, and my whole takeaways here. Encouraging Paul George performance overall, that he did go for 30 points. Thought we saw a little bit of the throwback version of him. But with all that being said, him being held scoreless in the fourth quarter straight up cannot happen on the nights in which Joel Embiid is not there. And to continue on, the Sixers as a team being held scoreless for the final 3 minutes and 34 seconds is inexcusable. The Sixers clearly need another ball handler with more on-ball juice than Kyle Lowry, which is what I want to circle back to here. And the Kings overall outscoring the Sixers 33-18 in the fourth. The Sixers looked incredibly incapable of handling the Kings' traps, and it was a really good Andre Drummond game. Shout out to Eric Gordon for finally showing a pulse there. So with all that being said, let's start right with Kyle Lowry. What specifically made me mad about this last night, again, I get the role in the offense, the need, all these things, but one of the clear reasons where Kyle Lowry is here is just to kind of be the adult on the court for stretches. He was subbed into this game, at this point being a 3-point game in the final 7 seconds, with the Sixers having a chance to tie, and he turned over the inbounds pass. And it was DeMar DeRozan that stole it from him, his former teammate from Toronto, which has to add a little extra sting. Now, inbound passes have been an issue for the Sixers team far more than any professional basketball team I can ever remember, and has been for several years now. That was one of the huge bright spots of having Nico Batum last year. Let's not forget that he would literally sub into games that he was not active or playing just to make inbounds passes. The Sixers do not have a guy like that this year, and while I've been optimistic players like Caleb Martin could potentially fill in that role, and we've seen him get a couple opportunities, it is becoming far more of a problem than it just straight up should ever be for, once again, a real NBA professional basketball team. But it was Lowry who was tasked with this yesterday, and he came up incredibly short. Now, let's first just take a look at the overall depth chart, and you can kind of see where the problems are evident. Obviously, we have our general starting five, and injuries have kind of ravaged this team once again. KJ Martin being out, Jared McCain obviously being out. Andre Drummond is going to miss tonight's game with the Warriors with his toe issue there. We'll see if Joel played, as he had a rest day last night, and it seems to be that foot injury is bugging him a little bit more than we've been made to believe. But looking down, that you do have that usual starting five. We'll stick with KJ Martin at the power forward for the sake of the depth chart listed on ESPN. Not sure if that is going to be there to stay there. Gershon Yabusele, to me at this point, I'm ready to very clearly say he's the fourth best player on this Sixers team. I don't mean that as an extreme indictment on guys like Caleb Martin or Kelly Oubre, but he just is very excellent, man. Constantly making the right decisions, and a dude who continues to overplay his expectations and that contract. Then beyond that, Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry as your second string guards just is not good enough in the year 2025 now. You got to have more youth. You got to have more options. And Gordon, while he's finally shooting the ball at a kind of a pass ball rate, it has been the opposite for Kyle Lowry. To dive into what Lowry has done over the past 17 games, he's played 19.1 minutes per game. Absurd stuff there. Just 2.2 points, 1.6 rebounds, 2.6 assists, a 21.2% field goal percentage, 15.8% from beyond the arc, 83% at the line. Now, granted, the primary role for Kyle Lowry, I think by everyone's standard and expectation coming into the season, was a veteran presence, that he's here to help Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain develop. he should not be here to help this team on the court, and that's unfortunately what is going to be happening. What is clearly happening now. Granted, for the immediate fix for starters, I would like Nick Nurse to give Jeff Dowtin a little bit more run. I don't think Jeff Dowtin is anything special, a guy that I have this super high ceiling or belief in his potential. But what I do think Jeff Dowtin is just your classic standard solid guard. He's going to make the right decisions. He's going to make decent passes. He's going to run pick and rolls. He can shoot the three-point at an acceptable clip. He's 26 years old. He's been in the G League forever. He's a fine basketball player. We've seen solid moments with Jeff Dowtin. Again, I don't think this is some ceiling changer, but what I do know is there's a little bit more juice there than what we're seeing with Kyle Lowry, a guy who can still create some separation off the dribble or can attack the paint and kick out for others, which we really are not seeing from Lowry anymore. Really, his only offensive role is to call plays and set screens. I don't really love that a 6-foot guard is the primary pick setter in a lot of situations that this team is around. Now, granted, guys like Andre Drummond, Paul George does it often as well. There's other examples of this, but if you just watch Kyle Lowry, if you lock out of the basketball and lock in on Kyle Lowry for possession, that's a lot of what you're going to see, that he's setting back screens for a guy, he's running, he's in motion, he's not really touching the basketball. Maybe he'll do a little dribble handoff or, pop the rock, get it past to him, that kind of thing real quick. But really what he's doing is a whole lot of just setting screens, moving around, and not producing at a high level on the floor. Now, to circle back to Jared McCain, the injury just really sucks by every single level here, and particularly from the stance that he is clearly far more important to the Sixers team than any of us could have expected. So it's officially has been labeled as a meniscus tear. He's officially had surgery on it, but what I do think is interesting there is there has not been a timeline release from the Sixers. All we've gotten is out indefinitely. They also have been pretty shy and keeping it close to the pocket for what that specific meniscus surgery are. Unfortunately, as Sixers fans, we are well familiar with the different stages of these with Joel Embiid specifically, but we don't know exactly what the surgery he has done with. The return very much is dependent on that. The full recovery can take as long as 6 to 12 months. We've also seen cleanups. Joel himself has been on the accelerated path where they basically just scrape the meniscus away and throw you back out there. Probably not the best option for McCain at this point in his career, as he is just a rookie, just 20 years old, and has a bright future, but you saw the impact that he was making on the floor. To kind of point out his stats while he was still with this team, we're talking 15.3 points per game, 2.6 assists, 2.4 rebounds, shot 46% from the floor, 38.3% from three. And when I talk about lack of juice with Kyle Lowry, that is everything that Jared McCain brought to the table. He's constant motion, willing to shoot from deep, creating plays, nonstop moving. It is awesome stuff that he brings to the basketball court. So I do believe there is probably this minuscule amount of hope that he could return by the end of the year. But I don't think that is enough to count on. And I think part of the reason that the Sixers have not given a timeline is not to put pressure on McCain to come back this season. Unfortunately, he is a player that you have to take the wide view on. Again, 20 years old, has a bright future. Any questions that you could have had about Jared McCain should have been answered based on the sample size that we saw to start the season. I'm incredibly optimistic about his future, and the Sixers cannot ruin that by rushing him back. So what does that mean exactly? The Sixers have to get active on the trade market. I'm past the point of, we got to wait and see. We got to see this roster. Now it is time to attack. That they are still playing better basketball. There are little things that can be fixed. Sure, that was a bad loss last night. A pretty inexcusable one of the more frustrating on the season, but it's one that can be fixed. The Sacramento Kings team aren't the bottom feeders of the league. I do think they deserve a little bit of a hat tip for playing some awesome defense, playing with some scrap. I know I've talked about Keon Ellis plenty on here, and that would certainly be pretty near the top of my list for trade targets. A guy that I think fits the description for a lot of these things that we're talking about. Maybe not quite as much as an on-ball creator as they need, but they also have to find a guy that can share the floor in Tyrese Maxey in situations. It's a pretty specific skill set that they're seeking for or searching for or need to add to make work with this. But when I speak about Keon Ellis, I do think that ship has sailed a little bit. There obviously was the firing of Mike Brown, and I don't think it is coincidental that Keon Ellis was in the starting lineup last night. So I think that probably was a little bit of a point of contention. Again, I never understood why he was not receiving more of an opportunity with the Kings there. Seems like that has changed, but there are other names that need to attack. Malcolm Brogdon makes a little bit too much money, I think, for them to make it work. Jordan Clarkson is a name I've seen floated out there. There are some guys that I would like to dig into. I even wouldn't mind taking a chance on a guy like Dennis Smith Jr., who is currently in the G League, but we've seen have some success as this rugged guard defender, a guy who can still put the ball on the floor and has a little bit more just youth and athletic ability that the Sixers team is clearly missing. But the one thing that I am certain of is I think we know the results of the Kyle Lowry experience. I understand, and I do think there is a world where he can still be active on this team, still can be playing a role, but if you're getting this level of production, it's just kind of over at this point. shout out to Kyle Lowry for the accomplished career that he has. I'm happy that he's finishing it here in Philadelphia, but it's also no, coincidence that he's repping Coach Lowry name tags on the sideline in the games that he's not playing. That's where he's at this stage in the career, and the Sixers cannot go down with the ship with that being their only plan of option as far as their guard rotation. So I hope that last night was a telling experience for Nick Nurse, a little bit of a wake-up call. Again, I think Lowry himself would be a guy that admits this role is too big for him based on this point in his career. We have not seen him be able to beat a guy off a dribble all season, it feels like, to this. So I do think there needs to be some changes made. We're getting close to that final push for the trade deadline. We still got a couple more days until that KJ Martin contract is officially eligible to be traded. I do think it's really disappointing and kind of frustrating for KJ specifically that he had just carved out a real role on the Sixers team. And I think him being injured during this stretch of play really increases the chances of a deal actually being done. I do think Martin had played himself into a role where maybe that he was looked at as a keeper. I do think that the need on this team kind of all adds to the trade being back in the work here. So it will be very interesting to see how the Sixers attack this next plan of action. I know, and by the way, Lonnie Walker, another name I'll throw in the mix, not quite the on-ball creator that a lot of guys or the player that I'm kind of picturing as the missing piece is, but I think they need to add something as far as youth athleticism at the guard position, because you cannot go down with the ship with Kyle Lowry being the only option there. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Would love to hear any names that you guys have in mind, but I'm ready to declare the Kyle Lowry experience over, and I hope Nick Nurse is on the same page with me. Appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into this video. As always, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video, and Happy New Year to everyone listening. Peace.